Hello, it's Jen and welcome. This tutorial is on how to crochet the wide open lace stitch. Here is a quick look at materials which I will link below, but we're going to dive right in. We are going to work our lace on a foundation single crochet row that is a multiple of 4 plus 1. For this tutorial, I'll be making 21 foundation single crochet. To work a foundation single crochet, you'll start by chaining 2, and you'll notice that I'm going to kind of hold on to the working yarn. Yarn over and pull through the loop on my hook, that's our first chain. Yarn over and pull through the loop, that's our second chain. And then we're going to insert our hook underneath the back loop and the back bump of the second chain from our hook. Then we sort of hop up, hold onto that working yarn over, pull through 1 loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. Now insert your hook under the thread to the right of your thumb, that's the back loop and the back bump, yarn over, pull through both of these threads, hop up, hold the working yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, let's do that again. Insert your hook under that thread to the right of your thumb and the back bump that you're holding on to, yarn over, pull through these threads, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. If the foundation single crochet is a new stitch for you, you can rewind and kind of study these stitches that I've made in slow motion. I prefer the foundation single crochet for starting projects like this one because it means that this edge of your piece is going to have the same tension and stretch to it as the final edge of your piece. With that being said, if you are simply not a fan of the foundation single crochet, you can alternatively chain a multiple of 4 plus 2 stitches. You're going to single crochet in the second chain from your hook and in each stitch across. This will still be considered the foundation row for our lace. We're not going to be calling this row 1, but simply our foundation. So whether you're working foundation single crochet or working a beginning chain and then working single crochets into that beginning chain, if you're making a swatch the same size as mine, there should be a total of 21 stitches on this foundation row, or whatever multiple of 4 plus 1 that you've chosen. I'm just finishing up my last few stitches. Remember, you can always rewind or even go into the settings and slow down the playback speed if you need a little more time with any section throughout this entire project. When you've finished your foundation row, it's a really good idea to go ahead and double check your stitch count. Make sure that the number of stitches that you have in this foundation row is a multiple of 4 plus 1. I have just counted and I have my 21 foundation single crochets, so I'm all set to move on to our lace pattern. When you're ready, insert your hook back into that last loop and we'll start lace pattern row 1. Row 1 begins with a stacked single crochet. Elongate the loop on your hook and then turn your work so that your working yarn is behind your foundation row. Then you're going to insert your hook into the very first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and make sure this loop is at the same height as the loop on your hook. Then yarn over and pull through 2. This is our first single crochet, and we're going to go ahead and mark the first stitch of each row. Now we begin a repeating pattern for row 1. As you can see, you're going to chain 2, and then you're going to work a double crochet 2 together. To do so, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That is the first half of the first double crochet, and then you're going to skip over the next 3 stitches and then yarn over and into that next stitch. You're going to insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then you complete this double crochet 2 together by working a yarn over and pulling through all 3 of the remaining loops on your hook. Every time we yarn over and pull through 3, we are going to mark that stitch. So every time you do a double crochet 2 together, you're going to grab a stitch marker or a scrap piece of yarn and mark that stitch. Now that we have that stitch marked, we're going to go back to our pattern, and we complete this repeating pattern by chaining 2 and working a single crochet into that same stitch. Now we go back to the beginning of the repeat by chaining 2, and now we're going to work a double crochet 2 together again, beginning in that same stitch, skipping 3 stitches, and ending in the next stitch. After we work that yarn over, pull through 3, we grab our stitch marker and mark that stitch. Once again, we're going to be marking every time we work a double crochet 2 together. Afterwards, you'll chain 2, single crochet in that same stitch, and then back to the beginning of the repeat, chain 2, double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch, skipping 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and ending in the next stitch. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 3, grab that stitch marker, mark that stitch, and we're marking these stitches just to make our life easier as we're working our next row. Chain 2, single crochet in that same stitch, back to the beginning of the repeat with a chain 2, and now we double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch, skipping 3 stitches, and ending in the next stitch. Yarn over, pull through 3, mark that stitch, now you're going to chain 2, single crochet into the same stitch, chain 2, double crochet 2 together, beginning in that same stitch, skipping 3 stitches, and finishing in the last chain. Yarn over, pull through 3, we're going to mark this last double crochet 2 together, and then we need to finish off this last repeat. So we chain 2 and single crochet in the same stitch. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at lace pattern row 1. Here is the first stitch that we marked with a stitch marker. This row begins and ends with a single crochet, and here we have our 5 marked stitches. These are those double crochet 2 together stitches that we marked. I like to think of these shapes as little mountain peaks, so row 1 has a total of 5 mountains. Now we're ready for lace pattern row number 2, which begins with a stacked double crochet. You can see that I have elongated the loop on my hook and turned the work so that the working yarn is behind the fabric. Next, I'm inserting my hook into that very first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop and make sure this loop is the same height as the loop on my hook. Yarn over and pull through both of these loops. Now we're going to turn our work so that we're looking at the edge of the fabric. You're going to insert your hook underneath these 2 threads along the edge, yarn over, and pull up a loop. What we've just created is a stacked double crochet, except for we have stopped before the very last yarn over and pull through 2. The next step is to skip the next chain 2 space, yarn over and insert your hook into the next stitch. This is our first marked mountain peak. Then you yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through the 3 remaining loops on your hook. We have just worked a yarn over, pull through 3. You know what that means. It means it's time to grab a stitch marker, and I'm just going to take the one from the mountain peak and use this one to mark the top of that double crochet 2 together. Now we begin our repeating pattern for row 2. This pattern begins by chaining 2, working a single crochet into the same stitch, and then chaining 2 again, and now we're going to do a double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch, skipping over the next chain 2 spaces, and ending in the next stitch, which will be our next marked stitch. So it begins in the same stitch and it ends in the mountain peak. We yarn over and pull through 3, and then I'm going to go ahead and take the stitch marker from the mountain peak and put it in the stitch we just made, which will be the mountain peak for this row. I know it's a little silly that I'm calling them mountain peaks, but sometimes it helps to have a visual. So now we go back to the beginning of the repeat, chain 2, single crochet in the same stitch, chain 2, and then double crochet 2 together, beginning in that same stitch. So yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, then yarn over and insert your hook into the next marked stitch. So you're skipping over the next 2 chain 2 spaces and working into the next stitch and completing that double crochet 2 together. Once again, we'll transfer this stitch marker to the double crochet 2 together that we just made and go back to the beginning of the repeat. I'm going to be quiet for the next couple of repeats just so you can watch the flow of the lace as it comes together. You can see that we're working into our last mountain peak and then transferring that stitch marker to the double crochet 2 together that we just made, but we're not quite at the end of the row yet. So we're going to do that repeat one more time, chain 2, single crochet, chain 2, and then double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch and ending in the first stitch from the previous round, which we have marked with a stitch marker. Row 2 will always begin and end with a double crochet. It'll either be the first half or second half of a double crochet 2 together stitch. Let's go ahead and have a look at lace pattern row 2. Row 2 looks just a little bit different. It tends to flare out at the edges just a little bit, and then the next row will straighten those edges back out. You still have 5 mountain peaks, but you have 4 in the middle, and then half of one on one end and the other half on the other end. Here we are on row 3. Row 3 begins with a stacked single crochet. Loosen that loop on your hook and turn your work so that the working yarn is behind your fabric. Insert your hook into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through 2. So that is our stacked single crochet, and it's also the first stitch of this row, so we're going to mark this stitch. Now we begin the repeating pattern for row 3, and it will feel very familiar at this point. So we've just worked a single crochet, and we're going to chain 2 and then work a double crochet 2 together, beginning in this same stitch and ending in the next mountain peak, our next marked stitch. If you're not using stitch markers, you can identify this stitch by skipping over the next 2, chain 2 spaces, and then working in the next stitch. Let's mark the double crochet 2 together that we just made, and then we're going to finish off our repeat by chaining 2 and working a single crochet in the same stitch. Now we can go back to the beginning of the repeat, which starts with a chain 2 and then double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch, skipping 2, chain 2 spaces, and ending in the next marked mountain peak. Take that stitch marker and mark this stitch, and then you're ready to chain 2 and single crochet in the same stitch. I'm going to be quiet for just a minute and work this row in real time to the end, and I'll come back so we can see how this row is completed. Here we are on the last repeat of the row. We chain 2, double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch. And this time we are ending in the very last marked stitch of the row. We can go ahead and mark this double crochet 2 together. Because this row began with a single crochet, it's going to end with 1. So we're going to go ahead and chain 2 and single crochet in the same stitch. This completes the repeating pattern, and it also completes row 3. So here we are. This is row 3. It begins and ends with a single crochet, and there are 5 mountain peaks working their way across this row. In fact, row 3 is the same as row 1, only row 3 is not worked into that foundation row. At this point, you now have all of the information that you need to continue crocheting the wide open lace stitch. To continue, you'll repeat pattern rows 2 and 3 in that order until your fabric reaches the desired length. I have written out the directions in the description below. You can take a screenshot of that, and if you're feeling comfortable, you're good to go. But because I feel like crocheting lace can be a little bit trickier, not so much the stitches, but just really getting used to the fabric and kind of being able to recognize where you're placing those stitches, the look of the lace itself, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple more rows. So we just finished row 3. That means we're going to go back to row 2, extend the loop on our hook, turn the work so that the working yarn is behind the fabric, insert your hook into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And then we turn our fabric so that the edge is facing us, and we insert our hook under these 2 threads on the side of the fabric, yarn over, pull up a loop, and you have 2 remaining loops on your hook. So that is the beginning of a stacked double crochet. We're stopping before we work the last yarn over pull through 2, and instead we're turning this into our double crochet 2 together by working a yarn over, skip the next chain 2 space, and insert your hook into the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 remaining loops on your hook. Once you complete that stitch, you can place a stitch marker and then continue on with the pattern repeat. You'll work a chain 2, single crochet in the same stitch, chain 2, and then double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch, skip the next 2 chain 2 spaces, and ending in the next stitch, which will be the next mountain peak. I have talked through these directions quite a few times now, so instead, while I'm crocheting this row, I want to take a moment to maybe do a little troubleshooting with you. There's a couple notes I would just like to offer. The first note is that when you're doing the first stitch in each row, these stacked double crochets and single crochets, make sure you're doing these stitches fairly loosely. You want your single crochet to be the height of a regular single crochet. You want the beginning of that stacked double crochet to be nice and tall, just like a regular double crochet. I just wanted to point that out. With stacked stitches, a lot of the height comes from just keeping those loops nice and loose on your hook. They really should be the same height as a standard double crochet or single crochet. The second note that I have for you is just kind of a way to help you recognize the fabric or get used to the look of the fabric. So when you're working the internal stitches, and by that I mean not the first or the last stitch, but the stitches in the middle, and you'll note that we're always working these stitches into the top of a mountain peak or into a top of a double crochet 2 together. The one thing I wanted to point out is you're always going into that stitch 3 times. The first time is when you're finishing off a double crochet 2 together. The second time is when you're working a single crochet. And the third time is when you're starting the next double crochet 2 together. So when you look at those stitches, they are each worked into 3 times. So if you're working up this lace and you get a little bit lost, that could serve as a bit of a signpost. Look back at the top of each one of those double crochet 2 together stitches and make sure that they're being worked into 3 times each. So we're coming up on the end of row 2. Remember, this row began with a double crochet, so it also ends with a double crochet, or more specifically, the final double crochet of that double crochet 2 together. Now we can stop and take a look at this pattern row once again. Now row 2 is the row where the edges flare out a little bit, and these edges will come back in when you work row 3. They have half of a mountain on either side and 4 in the middle. As much as I love my mountains and my stitch markers, I think it's important for us to work through a row or 2 without using any stitch markers. Just getting really comfortable with the look of the fabric and our stitch placement. Of course, you can keep using the stitch markers if they're making you more comfortable, and I actually think it's always a good idea to mark the first stitch of each row. That's just a very helpful thing. But for the sake of just really getting to know this fabric, let's go ahead and do a couple rows without any stitch markers at all. So since our last stitch of the previous row was a double crochet, we know that the first stitch of this row is going to be a single crochet. We're working lace pattern row 3, which begins with a stacked single crochet and then a chain 2, and then we do our first double crochet 2 together. It begins in the same stitch, and then you're going to skip over these next 2 chain 2 spaces. So there's a chain 2, a single crochet, another chain 2, and then the very next stitch is the top of the first mountain peak. This is where we're going to complete our double crochet 2 together, and then we can chain 2, single crochet in the same stitch, chain 2, and go back to working a double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch, skipping 2, chain 2 spaces, and ending in the next stitch. So this is our rhythm. Chain 2, single crochet in the same stitch, chain 2, double crochet 2 together, beginning in the same stitch, skipping 2, chain 2 spaces, and ending in the next stitch. I hope this is looking pretty clear and giving you confidence with this stitch and knowing that you can do it with or without the stitch markers. The stitch markers really are fine. They do tend to slow you down a little bit, and I think once you just get comfortable with your stitch placement, you can really groove right along with this wide open lace stitch. I feel like it can be easy to get a little confused at the end of each row or the beginning of each row, so I want to go ahead and work this row through to the end. So we will have done all of row 3 without stitch markers, and then we're going to go back and do all of row 2 without stitch markers. So here we are at the end of row 3. We're finishing up that double crochet 2 together, but that does not complete the repeat. To complete the repeat, you're going to chain 2 and then single crochet in that same stitch. Remember, row 2 begins and ends with a single crochet. After row 3, we go back to row 2. Remember to continue with this pattern. You're just repeating rows 2 and 3 respectively. So you'll work 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. Since row 3 ended with a single, row 2 is going to begin with that stacked double crochet, stopping just short of the last yarn over pull through 2. Then we're going to skip only 1 chain 2 space and then yarn over and work the rest of that double crochet 2 together in the next stitch. From here on out, the repeating pattern is back to what we're used to. Chain 2, single crochet in the same stitch, chain 2, and then work that double crochet 2 together. You're going to start in the same stitch, skip the next 2 chain 2 spaces, and in the next stitch, you're going to complete that double crochet 2 together. Then you go back to the beginning of the repeat and work this repeat all the way across the row. I'm going to go ahead and time travel to the end of this lace pattern row 2, just so we can see where those last stitches are placed. Here we are at the end of the row. Chain 2, single crochet in the same stitch, chain 2, and this last double crochet 2 together begins in the same stitch, and then you skip 1 chain 2 space, and it ends in the very first stitch of the previous row, and it's kind of down the side a little bit, so you really just want to skip that chain 2 space and look for the stitch right after that chain 2 space. And with that, we'll go ahead and bring this stitch tutorial to a close. I took a little more time on this one, and I hope that was helpful, but let me know if you have any questions at all in the comments below. I'm also kind of curious, how would you use this stitch? Next week, I'm going to be using this lace to create a pretty place setting. So like and subscribe so you don't miss that tutorial or future ones. I share tutorials on Tuesdays. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time.